Talk 49.
My name is Nigel A. James. Welcome to my second edition of Full Stop, half an hour of short stories. To begin with today, we're going back to just before Christmas 1975. At the airport in Vienna is a plane that is waiting to go to destination unknown. Destination unknown. We're saying hello to Otto Herold and Manfred Pollock. It was the 21st of December 1975. Christmas was coming. Vienna was cold and covered with snow. But there was no Christmassy feeling at all. In fact, things were bad. Carlos, the notorious international terrorist, and his band of German and Palestinian accomplices had taken over OPEC, and Sheikh Yamani of Saudi Arabia, and several other oil ministers too, were being held hostage in the OPEC headquarters in the centre of Vienna, and with 4 policemen dead, and the promise of even more violence, the Austrian government was in a difficult position, and so the terrorist demands were agreed to in full. These demands included a message in French to be read out at 2-hourly intervals on the radio, meals from the Intercontinental Hotel, and a plane to take the terrorists and hostages out of the country. But of course a plane needs a crew, and at Austrian Airways the call for volunteers went out, and Otto Herold, a young pilot at the time, and Captain Manfred Pollock were chosen. And so it was that on the morning of the 22nd of December 1975, Otto Herold and Captain Manfred Pollock were ready and waiting to take off in their fully fueled DC-9. And then, with terrorists and hostages on board, Captain Manfred Pollock requested permission to take off for destination unknown. And as they took off, they didn't know when or if they'd ever see Vienna again. They believed were on a flight into danger. But they needn't have worried. Nothing serious happened, and everything went incredibly well. Their flight turned into a tour of Middle East capitals with a hostage release at each stop. And when they reached Algiers, their final destination, the terrorists simply vanished into thin air, leaving Otto Herold and Manfred Pollock alone in their plane. But there was one small story that Otto Herold never forgot. Because there were no hostesses on board, Otto Herold had volunteered to serve coffee, and everyone was happy. That is to say, all except one. One of the hostages, an oil minister, rudely rejected the offer of coffee and demanded a cup of tea instead. Of course, Otto Herold was unable to help, and the oil minister became even angrier. And then, when Otto Herold went to collect the dirty plates and cups, one of the terrorists stopped him. The still none too happy oil minister was made to clear up the dirties instead. There were to be no more passengers' complaints for the rest of the journey. And that was the worst thing that happened on the flight to destination unknown, and Otto Herold and Captain Manfred Pollock returned safely home to Vienna. And 6 months later, Captain Pollock and Otto Herold were decorated by the Austrian president for their courage and bravery. And of course both continued flying, and Otto Herold was promoted to captain. And as everyone knows, captains can never stop flying, and Manfred Pollock and Otto Herold both spent their free time and much later their retirements building and flying model planes. But no models, however impressive, could ever replace the Viscounts, DC-9s and Airbuses which they once flew. Life for these very brave men was high up in the sky, and their flight to destination unknown was never forgotten. Captain Otto Herold and Captain Manfred Pollock, two very brave men who volunteered for a Christmas-time flight to destination unknown. A flight with a difference, where the first officer served the coffee and cakes. Destination unknown, Captain Manfred Pollock and Captain Otto Herold. You're listening to Full Stop on Talk 49. Advent in Vienna is a wonderful time of year. Everyone enjoys it. And now let's listen to an Advent story that's all about singing. Advent is a wonderful time and the Viennese love it. The city is dotted with small Advent markets and all more or less exactly the same. A beautifully decorated tree, hot spicy wine, Christmassy things one can buy, a wonderful Advent feeling, and of course Advently seasonal music. And about 10 years ago I was at just such a market, and this is what happened. I was having a wonderful time. Everything was great and everything Advently perfect. But it was the choir that provided the spirit of the evening, and singing mainly in English, they were very, very good. But the evening went quicker than expected, and soon came the very last song, and with it an unusual surprise. The conductor turned to the people, thanked them, and wished them a very happy Christmas and Merry New Year. And then, after turning back to the choir, closed his eyes and started conducting the very last number. And the choir started singing and the crowd started humming along. It was all very magic. And then came the very last line of this very last song. And just like a half-dying swan in great pain, the conductor, with still tightly closed eyes, raised his arms in an arch, paused for a second, then flutteringly and dramatically brought them back down again for the expected, well-practiced, majestic conclusion. But the choir didn't stop. They simply carried on singing. The last line had not been the last line at all. The singers had been singing from their song sheets and not even looking at the conductor. And the conductor, because of his tightly closed eyes, had not even noticed he was being ignored. But all's well that ends well. With a very red face, the conductor conducted hard to catch up, and of course brought the concert to a triumphant conclusion. And the applause was fantastic. The audience had had a wonderful evening. And that's how it was, an evening of magic, with more than 1 or 2 glasses of hot, spicy wine, and of course some Christmassy songs sung by a very fine choir. Advent, a wonderful time that the Viennese love, and I love it as well. And now we're in London. It's the last day of 1952. People are on their way home. Albert Gunter has just driven his double-decker London Red bus onto London's famous Tower Bridge. What came next was something that was really a shock. Way homes on London Red buses are for taking it easy. These stop-and-start trips allowed time for the reading of papers, and if sitting upstairs, the view of a London evening on its way into darkness is possibly the best in the world. But passengers to Dulwich in South London got more than they paid for whilst riding home for their suppers one late afternoon a long time ago. They not only flew, but made headlines as well. It was the last working day of 1952. Albert Gunter had just steered his number 78 bus onto London's famous Tower Bridge when it happened. All of a sudden, Albert Gunter felt his bus going up. The arm of the bridge on which he was driving was rising, and it looks as though his bus was about to make history by becoming the first ever London Red bus to fly off the bridge and sink in the Thames. But Albert Gunter knew what to do. Automatically, Albert Gunter dropped down in gear and put his foot hard down on the gas. His bus needed speed, and he only had seconds. The gap between the two arms of the bridge was increasing, and it would soon be too late. His bus had to fly over the gap or crash into the river. There was no other choice. But Albert Gunter succeeded, and his bus took off and flew for just a few seconds, and that was enough. And down came the bus with a bang, and it was loud, and the passengers and seats were thrown about as the bus came to a stop on the other arm of the bridge, and thankfully there were only one or two minor injuries. But that wasn't the end of the story. Albert Gunter was decorated for bravery by the Queen. He had saved the lives of his passengers, and, by the way, that was the first ever medal that the new young Queen Elizabeth II was to award. A medal not only for bravery, but also for flying a bus. And all London joined in with its praise and its thanks, and Albert Gunter was made London's 1953 Man of the Year. And that was good so. He had not only saved the lives of 63 people, he had given them a story to take home as well. The day they flew home in a bus. Have you ever flown home in a bus? I haven't either. See you at the bus stop tomorrow. School concerts are always exciting. Things always happen. But what happened at this school concert a long time ago was not only something unique, it's something I've never forgotten. A bow and an earring. It had been a beautiful concert. The boys and girls of my son's former school in Vienna had played incredibly well, and the 3 musical groups had been magnificent. The jazz band was Dixie, the rock group 50s and 60s, and the classics which finished the evening were played on the harp, violin and piano by 3 very talented girls. But the final moments of this wonderful concert did not go as planned. The conclusion was just a little dramatic, and it starred the young violinist. The final notes were just about to be played, when the violinist's bow became entangled in her left earring, and the music suddenly stopped. An uncomfortable silence fell on the hall, and it seemed to go on for a very long time. And the untangling of the violinist's earring and bow was no easy matter. But of course the violinist soon became free, and the 3 young musicians carried on as if nothing had happened, and the audience then applauded as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. For a brief moment in time, the players and the audience had become one, united in silent suspense, something that no one had ever experienced before, and the applause at the end was applause of relief, and the young violinist was the happiest of all. And that was the charm of the evening, and that's why it won't be forgotten. And that's the magic of school concerts, the moments that make them unique. It was a wonderful concert, full of wonderful magic, and one very big surprise, a bow and an earring, and I won't forget it. A bow and an earring, a wonderful concert. Christmas presents are not always easy. Here's a short story that might inspire you to go on to great things. A patchwork present. Christmas is coming, and Lucy Arbel is at home in Vienna and knitting a patch. And this little patch has a long way to go. In fact, it's going to Canada. But when it gets there, it won't be alone. There will be other patches too, and they will be coming from China, Africa, the USA, Great Britain and France, and all to become part of a patchwork present for little Sarah Arbel. When little Sarah Arbel was born 5 years ago, Lucy Arbel had an idea. Why not make a patchwork blanket for her new little granddaughter? It would be perfect for Christmas, and Lucy Arbel's daughter-in-law agreed without question. What a brilliant idea! And then together they had another brilliant idea. Why not ask other friends and relatives to join in with the present as well? Everyone who wanted could knit a patch and send it to Canada too. And not only once, but also year after year, and all to be part of an ongoing, ever-growing blanket of colourful patches. And now, 5 years later, 27 more little patches will be making their way from faraway places to Canada. And there's another interesting side to this story as well. These patches don't only look nice when all sewn together, they keep family and friends together and in contact as well. And because each little patch arrives with a card, the Arbels in Canada have lots of nice Christmas cards to admire and hang up, and all from all over the world. Lucy Arbel had an idea, and now people all over the world are doing the same. Everyone's knitting a patch, and little Sarah Arbel in Canada is keeping warm in the winter in a blanket that grows every Christmas. Lucy Arbel, a lady who not only thinks of today, but the future as well. And next year she'll be knitting again. Happy Christmas, Lucy Arbel. Things were hard just after the war. Margit Felder was working on the trams. Here's a story of fun, singing and laughter. Getting through life is often a question of making the most of things as they happen. And when times are hard, every job is as good as the next. There is no job too low, and this Margit Felder knew well. It was just after the war. Things were difficult, and Margit Felder was hungry and looking for work. Vienna was rebuilding at the time, and public transport was at the top of the list, and there were jobs to be had. And so Margit Felder started working on the trams as a conductress. The money was okay, and there was a smart dark blue uniform too. But there was more to being a conductress than just selling tickets and smiling. there were other sides too. And there are still two things that Margaret Felder remembers well. The first, and perhaps the hardest, was the coupling, uncoupling, and recoupling of the rear carriages at the beginning and end of each journey. This wasn't so bad in the summer, but the lifting of the heavy and dirty and often freezing cold hooks in the winter was no fun at all. In fact, it was really quite hard. But that was life and all part of the job. The second thing Margaret Felder looks back upon are the moments of fun, and late Saturday nights were the best. Margaret Felder's tram route, the line 43, connected the outlying wine district of Neuwaldeck with the centre of Vienna. Many of the passengers, if not most, were still over merry and over happy as they boarded the tram for a late-night ride home of laughing, joking, and always very loud singing. And more often than not, Margaret Felder broke all the rules and joined in with the fun. And good fun makes life not only easy, but interesting too. And Margaret Felder could write volumes about things she's experienced. But her best memories of all are the people she met. Margaret Felder, she's been down the highways and byways of life, and was always on the right track, and even used to sing on the job, and all the passengers loved her. Margaret Felder, when she blew her whistle, the tram started moving. The weather has turned very cold, and buckets of hot steaming water will always help you get through the winter. Here's Edith Nini and her Hungarian secret. Edith Nini grew up in the depths of an Hungarian forest, and she knows the secret of getting through freezing cold winters without catching colds. And this secret is nothing more than bowls of hot water. Every evening, Edith Nini's mother would prepare the bowls of hot water, one for each family member. And into each bowl of piping hot water went a touch of bicarb of soda and a sprinkling of salt. And there the family would sit in a circle, each with their feet in a bowl and all having fun, stories and jokes, and for those old enough, a cup of hot spicy wine. Wonderful ends of very hard days. And these bowls of hot salty water were very important. Edith Nini grew up in a very poor family. Everyone, even the children, had to work very hard. Foot baths in piping hot water kept people in very good health, and very good health meant money as well. Edith Nini, who's now 86, grew up in the depths of an Hungarian forest, and she's never had a cold in her life. Bowls of piping hot water with bicarb of soda and a small pinch of salt. This could be something for you. You will not only have very clean feet, but good health as well. It's not only cheap, it's easy as well. Edith Nini and bowls of hot water. Hot water certainly helps. Now, as everyone who knows me knows, I collect sayings, and my saying today comes from the top of a Tyrolean mountain near Innsbruck. Listen to these fine Tyrolean words. If you go to the top of a mountain and look at yourself in a mirror, you will see yourself at the top and not at the bottom where you usually are. Wonderful words. Here they are, just one more time. If you go to the top of a mountain and look at yourself in a mirror, you will see yourself at the top and not at the bottom where you usually are. Fine words from Tyrol. And now, to finish our programme, my thoughts on the natural chain. It is a fairly accepted fact that Charles Darwin was correct when he wrote his book on the origin of the species. And I too, like most people, agree with that which he wrote. That is to say, with most of it. There were just one or two minor things that I wasn't happy with, and one of them was that man is at the top of the evolutionary pile. Man is more than that. Man is more than himself. It is a fact that everything on this earth shares exactly the same origin, and everything that exists does so because of one incredible coincidence. All of us, and everything else too, has not only to thank the Big Bang for being here, but also that which preceded it too. All of us, with no exception at all, have been on our way here since that first fiery moment of long, long ago, and possibly before it as well. And the fact that we are here right now has only to do with our position in the chain of the being. But people are unlike anything else on this planet. We are special. And we are special because of our status. Every other being, be it animal, vegetable or mineral, is simply a passive link in the natural chain. We, on the other hand, are able to decide upon the next link, and it doesn't have to be a son or a daughter. It can even be a ship or a plane or a train. Because we are part of nature, then everything which we create is also a part of nature, and our creations and inventions will then assume their role as part of the natural chain, and airplanes are the perfect example. The first plane which was able to actually fly was a very simple machine, and it flew for just a few meters. But once out of the box, it had to become more. This invention of man sucked more and more people into its being until it became what it is today. It has, if you so wish, decided the fate of millions of people, and in more than one way. Planes can do much. They can take us on holiday, they can rescue us, and unfortunately they can kill us. Just look at fighters and bombers. So this of course means that all of the horrible bombs which they drop, because they are only possible because of the planes which we built, are also part of the natural chain. And of course, when we bomb, we injure people, and then, if there are any survivors, we need medicine. And medicine too is also part of the natural chain, sometimes good and sometimes absurd. We can terminate life with it. Abortions are perfect examples, and we can cure, meaning then that our power over life and death is also a part of the natural chain. But much of that which we created was intangible too, and at the top of the list was religion. And like most abstracts, it not only caused great hardship, but moments of joy and pure beauty as well. But of course the big question still remains. Did we create God, or did He create us? The choice again is all ours, because it is simple. God exists because we want him to. And so, where does this leave the future? It leaves it in the same place as the past before we arrived. Before we were born, we were happy. We had no idea of life or this world or anything else. Nothing existed. And the same will be again when we leave. Nothing will exist, and we will be happy again. And that too is part of the natural chain. We've come now to the end of our show. Thank you very much for listening, and please join me again next time. I'm Nigel A. James. Bye-bye for now.
Talk 49.